Are you guys able to hear me?
Good on my end.
Yep.
All right, good deal. Well, thanks for joining me. Appreciate your time, guys. My name is Brent Durbecker. I'm the sales manager for Skyspan. Some of us may have talked before, some of us may have not. Just wanted to go over the product line, talk to you about kind of the ways to sell the product that has worked best for some of our dealers, and also I wanted to do just a quick presentation on how, not just with Skyspan, with all SRP products, we might be able to assist you guys better with your rendering requests, and I think it'll actually be really helpful for you guys. So jumping right in, and feel free to stop me at any time. Okay, so your biggest challenge with Skyspan is we're selling a commercial umbrella that is really more of a permanent structure. And so when you're dealing with smaller customers like a HOA association or a country club, sometimes there's this mindset that a commercial umbrella can just be purchased at Home Depot or down the road, and it's kind of one of those products that needs to be replaced annually and it's just replaceable. And what we're really trying to convey with our product and with Skyspan is that this is more of a permanent structure. It's going to last longer than a single season, and you're going to have a pretty big extended use from it. The four main selling features I've found with the Skyspan product line are here on the slide. The first is the wind rating. We have the best warranty on wind rating for commercial umbrellas. It allows for a lot of peace of mind and just no worrying with the product. The second thing is we have larger sizes, 10 to 20 foot umbrellas versus your normal umbrellas, might be 6, 8, 10 foot, fit in the center of each table. When I'm selling to customers, one of the things I'll talk about a lot with them is this idea of cleaning up. Rather than having a 6-foot umbrella in the center of each table, you could use a 20-foot umbrella, cover 3 or 4 tables, and what you're doing is you're removing some of that clutter that can be found when you've got an umbrella in the middle of every table. The third thing that we've got is a really signature conic look. You can identify the product from the road. You can see it from afar. It's got a unique look versus a traditional umbrella that might just have the canopy pulled tight over the ribs. So it's really got a signature look that we've sold in smaller customers like HOAs and neighborhood pool areas, and we've sold to really nice hospitality areas where like the Westin. And whether it's or one of these more fancy environments, it seems like the product always seems to enhance the environment. And then the last thing that we really focus on is the dependability of the product. With that wind rating and with our warranty, customers don't have to constantly be concerned about closing the umbrellas or putting them away should bad weather come up. Some additional things I've found to be useful when talking with customers, increased seating for patrons. When I'm selling to a restaurant, I'll talk about how you can extend your seating using the umbrellas. We sell these up north with heaters a lot of the time. For example, we've got a restaurant up in Wisconsin called Maddie's, and they use infrared heaters on the cantilevers. And this allowed them to keep their outdoor patio open. And with a northern environment like that, normally they'd be closing in September or October. So it really allowed them to use the area longer, and that was a big selling feature for them. When we're selling down south, one of the things a lot of people do is misting, or even just the umbrella themselves, which will cool the area pretty significantly. Some of the other benefits, it's just the all-weather protection, increased dining usage, year-round marketing tool. We haven't really been doing this as much as we could, but you have the ability to put it on the canopy. So a lot of our customers who are using this in an area where they want to do a little bit more marketing, it's a big thing, especially with sponsors. Like up north at the new Meadowlands Stadium, we did some umbrellas printed for Budweiser. And Budweiser was a purchaser of the umbrellas, and they did that because they could use the umbrellas as a marketing tool. So now I'm going to get into the different umbrellas themselves. The best way for me to think of them is sort of in tiers of pricing, because when I get into the shapes and sizes, they all come in really the same shapes and sizes. So the best way to look at them is sort of 3 different tiers of pricing. The quickest way to kind of think of it is Horizon, which is your base level, being around a $3,000 cost. Your Sunset, which is the retractable version of the Horizon, being at about a $4,000 cost. And then your Cantilever, which is the most popular, being at about a $5,000 cost. So a lot of times when I'm talking with an end user and the customer, and I'm trying to identify what product works best for them, usually because they all come in the same sizes and shapes, you can really kind of hone in on what that budget is and what they're going to be using it for. And that'll help you kind of recommend which of the 3 umbrellas might work best for them. So at this point, if you guys have any questions, I'm going to go into all the product details, but anybody, please feel free to jump in anytime with any questions. The Horizon umbrella is our center post fixed umbrella. It can be retracted, but it takes about 15 to 20 minutes, so we call it a fixed umbrella. To me, this is the best product to sell when you're selling with a HOA pool area or a customer who's going to use this for like seasonal use. Because what most people will do at the pool areas will be they will open the umbrellas before Memorial Day weekend when they're getting the pool set up. So lock them open, leave them open all season long. At the end of the year when they're shutting down the pool area, they'll close the umbrella and store it. And you can leave the umbrella on site and physically remove it from the site. But it's got an all-aluminum frame, stainless steel hardware, so it does really good in marine environments. So that's where we kind of see the most use for this product. They come in square, hexagonal, rectangular, and with all the different models, the Horizon, the Sunset, and the Vista, which we're going to go into, most of the customers I've worked with typically go with the largest size. So in this case, it's going to be the 18-foot hexagon or the 13-foot square. And the reason they'll go with the largest is because the price difference doesn't really change that much from a 10 to a 12 to a 13-foot square, but the pricing really does jump between the different models. For example, a Horizon to a Sunset is going to be about a $1,000 difference. A 13 to a 14-foot size difference is only going to be maybe $100. So most people in any of these given models are typically going to gravitate towards the largest. So next we have the Sunset. The Sunset and the Horizon are identical from the outside. The only difference is the column has an internal crank mechanism that allows the umbrella to open or close in about 30 seconds. Your biggest benefactor here is going to be someone who might have to close the umbrella on a short notice. If you look at the top left photo, we did the Hilton gas lamp in San Diego. One of the cool things about that project is we did those on weighted base plates. When we do a weighted base plate for the Sunset or Horizon, it's a 1,000-pound weighted base plate, and it consists of 4 plates that are stacked together and bolted together to achieve that 1,000 pounds. One thing people will ask us a lot is, can we do cantilevers with the weighted base plate? And we can't. There's just too much weight and too much moment on the base plate. We would simply need close to 10,000 pounds of weight to anchor a cantilever. But with the center post umbrella, we can do it. And this is really good if you're ever dealing with maybe an apartment complex with a rooftop pool. Like that's usually when we need to use a weighted base plate because they can't anchor to the concrete because they've got a waterproof membrane or something. In that case, for the San Diego project there, we had a garage rooftop where basically underneath that was a parking deck, and so they couldn't go through the concrete. Originally, that was going to be a cantilever project, but they had to actually go with a Sunset so that we could use the weighted base plate. Just like the Horizon, it's available in the same shapes and sizes, and typically people will gravitate towards the largest. So again, this is probably going to be a customer who might need to close these on a moment's notice. And for most of you guys, like anyone in Georgia or Tennessee area, I would probably recommend the Horizon. Like we've got a lot of those here where people haven't closed them. Like here in Carrollton, where Corcat's based out of, we've got probably 10 units spread across the city that haven't been closed in 4 or 5 years. And it's just because they're not needed to. Now, if you're in a coastal area, I'd probably recommend the Sunset or the cantilever so that you can retract them. So going next into the Vista, the cantilever model.
Hey, Brent, real quick.
Yep.
Question about wind loads. Down in Miami and Broward, where the wind loads are the wind load requirements a lot higher. Can you all meet those?
So, okay, with the wind loads, basically, these aren't considered like the shade structures. When we're doing the weighted base plate, we don't have to meet like the local building codes. This is going to be kind of like when you see on South Beach where you've got those restaurants with the umbrellas on the weighted base plates. Same deal with those there. I mean, we have to do a weighted base plate umbrella. Now, if you want to do a permanent structure, something that's not retractable or fixed like the Horizon or Sunset or Vista, we can engineer and seal them to higher wind loads. So if you want to go with a higher engineered product, we can do that. But the umbrellas themselves really kind of have a ceiling on how strong we can make them because the frame's got an extruded aluminum column, the arms are aluminum extruded ribs. Really, those are our limiting factors. They can only tolerate so much. And at that point, it's not like superior shade where we have the option of simply resizing the steel because the extruded aluminum kind of is what it is. It's our ceiling. With that being said, the Vista has the ability to be a little more customized than the other two. One of the things we kind of run into sometimes, especially people who have sold maybe superior shade, is they'll ask about, can we do in-ground columns? And with the Sunset and Horizon umbrellas, we can't do in-ground columns because we're buying those extruded aluminum columns at set like 8-foot lengths. And so, for example, we don't have the option to just add 3 feet onto the column like we do with Superior Shade. Now, when we're doing a Vista cantilever, you can really customize the umbrella to do what you need it to. For example, we've got cantilevers in Las Vegas that have a 14-foot eave height. We've got in-ground cantilevers in certain installations. You can really customize that unit. One of the most popular things to do on it is to put arms attached to the column perpendicular to the column and mount heaters to it. Electrical access panels, those are things that we'll typically do with the cantilevers. The most popular cantilever is going to be the 18-foot hexagon or the 16-foot square. Some other popular things that we do with that is doing multiple canopies attached to a single column. If you look at the bottom picture, that's a Del Frisco's grill in Washington, D.C. And what you've got there is you've got 2 16-foot square canopies attached to that center column. So that column there in the middle is actually close to 10-inch diameter steel. Now these we can sometimes engineer to do more. For example, we installed 10 of these at Disney Art of Animation Resort in Orlando, and we had to engineer the umbrella to be capable of 85-mile-per-hour winds when open. And that's an example of when we did actually switch out the aluminum extruded arms for steel arms. Also, unlike the Horizon and Sunset, when we fabricate the cantilevers, those columns are steel. So no aluminum in the column or the arm, the cantilevering arm, and we can really customize that kind of as needed. The standard lead time for any of those 3 units, the Horizon, the Sunset, and the Vista, is going to be about 3 to 4 weeks. And then when we customize it, for example, increasing the height of the column on the Vista, then it's going to become about 4 to 6 week lead time. Just a quick recap so you'll know how to remember this. The Horizon is a fixed umbrella. If you think about the Horizon, when you look at the Horizon is fixed. It doesn't change. Just like the Horizon umbrella doesn't close. And then if you think about the Sunset, sun sets, it goes down. The Sunset umbrella can go down. It's stupid, but it's the easiest way to remember it that I've found. Next, we have the Panorama. The Panorama is really not an umbrella. What it is, it's considered a building structure. So if you look at our standard price list, you'll notice that there isn't a price set for the Panorama. And that's because wherever we sell it, we have to engineer it to the local building code. So, for example, the top image was done at Spring Skate Park in Texas. We had to engineer that 20 by 20 cantilever to do 135-mile-per-hour winds. The one on the bottom left was actually done down in Puerto Rico, and it had to do less than that, but that's a 20 by 40 double tonic. So when people talk about the Panorama, a lot of times we'll get requests for quotes for like a 16-foot square panorama. And we do cantilevered panoramas just like the one in the top photo, but it's considered a building. So whereas that cantilever has to be engineered and sized and priced to meet 135-mile-an-hour winds, the Vista cantilever in a 16-foot square doesn't have to meet those same requirements. So a lot of times I'll see people send in a request for quote for a 16-foot square panorama, and I'll be trying to tell them, you might be better off quoting a Vista because the price point's going to be about a third of what it's going to be with the panorama. So depending on who your customer is, you may want a permanent building, and that's great. We can totally do that. But it's a little harder to sell because it is a pretty expensive product because for all intents and purposes, they're installing a building. So with the panorama, just quick recap, permanent building, and we can really customize the sizes. Next, we have the Wave Crest. Here we've got kind of 4 designs of what was once the original Wave Crest design. We've kind of dialed it down. I've got a new design which I can email to you guys later. We recently did a project with one of our dealers down in Florida, in Tavares, Florida, at the Waterman Hospital, where we had to engineer the Wave Crest to do 135-mile-an-hour winds with canopy on. And we ended up having to move away from that top left image design, which kind of had that signature arched column style. And we had to go with more of a straight leg column design. So I've got to update this PowerPoint to have kind of more of a permanent 135-mile-per-hour Wave Crest on it. But know that we can do that. With the cabanas, we offer 2 styles. We offer the conic shape, which is the one you see in the top left, and then we also offer the flat top cabana, which has more of a pergola style canopy. I just want to go over some featured installations, kind of help give you guys some ideas of Skyspan customers. We do a lot of country clubs. I'd say it's one of our biggest customers. Also multi-housing, it's another major customer for us. This is the Detroit Golf Club up in Michigan, and here they've got 3 16-foot square cantilevers all in a row along the pool area. This is actually a rooftop installation in California. If you look, they've got 2 12-foot square cantilevers facing one another, and then outside of that they have 2 10-foot square sunset portable umbrellas. Delta Swift Grill, which we showed in the business page. In the top left picture, you can really get perspective on how those 3 canopies are laying up. That column there on the left side is basically supporting the furthest left canopy and then the center canopy. And then all the way on the right side, they have this independent 15-foot square canopy. It was a pretty cool project where they did heaters and misting, and it really allowed for kind of a year-round solution to the weather. We've done actually a lot of Delta Swift Grills. We've done them in Tampa, we've done them in Dallas, we've done them in D.C. The next few installs are kind of just the same setting, a restaurant, high-end, with different solutions. So in this case here, they actually went with 4 independent Vista cantilevers in about a 10 or 12 foot square. And then on the next slide, we've got up in Maryland. This one's a little different versus the regular 502 waterproof fabric. They actually use Solstice, which is more of a mesh material, but allows for kind of different looks. And that bottom left picture, you can already see how you can sort of see through that canopy. Not my favorite just because you lose that waterproof ability, but it is kind of cool install where they actually did 2 doubles. So if you look on that top left picture, you can see 5 canopies total. So you got 2 doubles on the left side and on the far right one's independent. But again, you're looking at like a 60-foot linear area, and you have 3 columns. So again, this installation really kind of showcases that idea of let's clean up the space, let's open it up, or rather than having, 10 to 20 umbrellas in the middle of every table, you've just got 3 columns covering the entire space. So again, really cleaning up that area without cluttering it. There's an installation up in Galena, Illinois, where we got 3 14-foot hexagon Vista cantilevers. Just a nice look. That combination of colors is probably one of our most popular with bronze frame and canopy. This is a little bit more detail on that Hill gas lamp project I told you about using the sunset umbrellas. In that top left photo, you can see how the umbrella looks closed and with a weighted base plate. One thing I would point out to your customers and to you guys is when these umbrellas close very close to the ground. The larger the umbrella, closer to the ground. So those are 13-foot squares. Those grids close almost all the way down to the base plate. And the way you need to be kind of fixed furniture underneath. So let's say you have webfoot tables underneath these units, wouldn't probably be your best solution. So what's going to happen is those ribs won't be able to close over top of the fixed table. Now, when you're dealing with that, what I would recommend is the cantilever Vista can be done with an optional rotation. And what that allows you to do is you can swing the canopy away from the tables and close them somewhere else. And one of these jobs I'm going to show you in a minute will showcase that idea. Actually, this project. In the left photo, you can see you've got webfoot tables with 16-foot square cantilevers over top of them. In the top right photo, you can see how close these close to the ground. Even with the snow, you're looking at probably 2 feet above the ground. Now, what they've done here is these columns will actually rotate. So in the left photo, that's them swung over the table. Then when they needed to close them, they rotated them 180 degrees, closed them over the grass area, and stored them there for the winter. And that's typically how we would recommend you do store it for the winter, with a canopy cover on top of it. You can fabricate it to look identical to the canopy. So it just kind of blends right in how it looks. This was done here in Georgia. This is 18-foot hexagon vistas. They did 5 of these around the pool area. Again, these were columns. The idea being, you're looking at that top left photo, you can cover the hot tub area, then rotate it about 90 degrees and cover the 0 into your pool area. So we usually do these around residential areas where we want to have a little bit more control of orientation of the shade in relation to the daytime. But most of the time when we're selling commercial, they kind of have already identified how they want to align the structure, and they're going to go with the fixed one to save some money. This is a Corcat job pulled up in Skyspan, Hawaii. You've got 5 16-foot square cantilevers around the restaurant patio. If you look at the top left photo, you'll notice how the column falls outside the rock wall area. The idea there being when they want to close these, they have to close them over the restaurant and be in the way. They want to rotate them 180 degrees, close them over the grass. So that way, they're not going to be an obstruction to the restaurant patio. There's a project done out in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the one at State Field for the Driller Stadium. They did 4 of our 10 by 13 rectangle cantilevers. These were customized just a little bit to actually increase height 2 feet so that people who were seated underneath the umbrellas wouldn't lose sight of the baseball, if they get hit pop fly or something. So just a slight tweak to the customization. These were also done with pivot columns so they can close outside of the area. They can swing them also against the railing. So once the umbrella is closed, you can also still rotate it. So even when it's closed, you still have that ability to rotate it. A lot of times people keep it closed, so they just rotate it 90 degrees, maybe open it somewhere else. Here in Carrollton, the Cork offices, we did the Carrollton Amphitheater. It's kind of a cool custom project, an 8,500 square foot amphitheater. And then on the bottom right photo, you can also see we've got a series of this cantilevers also over some site furniture. The Spring Skate Park, this is that 20-foot square cantilever and panorama structure I showed you earlier. Just kind of a cool, large structure. Here we have a center post hyperbolic umbrella. You can do these with both Superior Shade or Skyspan, kind of just piggybacked off their design. You can do it in 13, 16, and 20-foot square. The biggest benefit is going to be that it's waterproof or Superior Shade option. I like this option when I'm dealing with somewhere where they have panoramic views, where they're worried about something being in the way. Those hyperbolic umbrella canopies have like a really low profile to them, so it's not really going to have as much of an obstruction to the outlying view versus maybe one of our umbrellas, which might have a larger canopy profile and might get in the way. Okay, rendering request. This is going to be pretty helpful for you guys who like to submit comp rendering requests, not just for Skyspan, but actually for multiple divisions. So I'm going to go into a few things about what we're looking for. The first is, preferably, we submit requests for rendering in the form of sending in a formal quote request. With that, please submit the location address. Sometimes you guys will send us pictures, which is really helpful of what you're looking for and where you're looking for them in our renderings. But if we don't have all the dimensions, a lot of times when we do have a location address, we pull it up in Google Earth, use the ruler function, and pull some dimensions to help on our end to scale our rendered structure in line with what we're seeing in the image. The second thing is, if you get us measurements for such, more the better. That's always a huge help. But again, when we have the address, it's also a big help too in case you guys miss something that we're looking for. A lot of times with those measurements, you get a description of where you're looking for them, or you can just sketch on top of the site where you're looking to have those, but help as well. We also ask that people give us the details of what units they're wanting rendered, the model number, the size, the shape, maybe what colors they're looking for. I'm going to get into the perpendicular and parallel line perspectives and kind of talk about how we create a rendering once we've got an image, kind of ask you guys for what we're looking for in photos so that we can kind of create the best rendering possible. So we're using a combination of SketchUp and 3D Max Studio. And what we do is, first we start in SketchUp, and what we're doing is we are trying to find axis and orientation for our rendering that meets what's happening in this image. So what they do is they look for straight, perpendicular, and parallel lines in the photograph so that we can create the axis for us to basically align our structure. So in these two photographs, what we've got is they're pulling these lines that you can see them highlighted in the pink. And what that's doing is it's making sure that when we put and drop our structure into this picture, the orientation is correct. And it's basically just a tool for aligning the image. So one of the things our guy usually asks is, take some pictures trying to find these perpendicular and parallel lines. He also says if you can't do it and you just haven't got it down yet, just take a ton of pictures. I mean, it always helps. Typically, what I'll do is sort of make an arc around the subject I'm trying to have rendered and just take a few different angles. Typically, if you're taking up pictures, you'll find one that's great.
You just pull tape and just tape lines if there is one there.
I'll talk about that with that. The other thing I'd point out is both of these images were asked for renderings, and in the left image you can see, great, here we have a rendering that represents the space and the structure. The image on the right, you can't really see anything except the columns. One of the things that's really easy to do if you're not paying attention to it is people want to take a picture highlighting the space so much that oftentimes they don't zoom out or step back far enough to actually include the rendering in the image. So one of the things we typically will suggest and recommend people do is just step back a little when you take the pictures, because we can crop the photo and tighten it up for you. When we're given a really tight space, a lot of times I'll get just 4 or 5 pictures that will turn out just like that rendering on the right, where you're really not going to get perspective on the product on the right. Here we have parallel and perpendicular lines. Basically, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but basically using the farthest side of the concrete pad and the closest side, and the left side and the right side. You can even pull dimensions and access lines from the building itself. So using all these straight lines is what really allows him to create the space. So then on the right, here's the end result rendering. One of the other things I'm going to talk to you about is visual cues that you can put in your image that will help us on our side. Also some things to avoid. And let me just jump right into that and it'll make more sense. I'm going to send you guys a larger version of this picture, but what this guy did, this is out in Texas. He's actually placed orange cones into the picture, and what he's done is he's dropped a white rope from cone to cone to cone. And what he's done is he's laid out the space for the render using orange cones as visual cues. And what that does is those rope lines going from cone to cone actually can be photoshopped out. And what they're doing is they're creating those perpendicular and parallel lines for our guys to pull access points off to create the structure. Some of these other renderings will show it a little better. There you go, right next to the blue slide, you can see the first orange cone running up to the left side. So what he's done here is taken his measurements, laid out the cones with a white rope, and given us those dimensions for the area, and that allows us to perfectly create that shade structure over the playground.
You get a vertical dimension in there too.
It helps that. That would definitely be a big help. One of the things to avoid, in this picture here, you can see you've got this tree on the left side, tree on the right side. It takes so much time for our guys to basically dissect the photo, to pull out those branches. It really adds a lot of time on our side. So, for example, if you look at the far side of that playground area where it's wide open grass, if the image had been taken from that side of the playground, looking back towards where the photographer is in reality, there would be no obstructions to the shade structure. So, although it would be done, it really adds time to the process, makes it more difficult. Here's just an example where on the right, the guy Google an image of the requested area with a little layout showing a two-scale structure, exterior shade. On the left, you've got the image. There you've got a rendering showing those sails. So just kind of an example of how you can sketch that to make it a little easier for our guys to determine where they're supposed to go. Other things to keep in mind, and I'll go into detail on each of these, how zoomed in the image is, the image perspective, and centering your image. For example, here you have a playground area where the rendering's being requested. Two things kind of about me that I look hard to work with here. One is it's very zoomed in, so you know the structure is going to be a little harder to see. And on the right, where you actually have the rendering, you can see the end result. You've got a really zoomed in, can't really grasp what the structure looks like from a distance. So if they had stood about 20 feet back further, it looked a little better. Also bearing in mind where that column falls. That big purple column right there will obstruct some of the view as well. So if you're going to maybe 20 feet back and a little to the left, you really could have had a clean view of what that space would have looked like rendered. This sounds stupid, but center the image on what you want rendered. On the left, you've got a picture where they wanted a rendering of a shade structure over the table, but they didn't center the frame of the image. So in the rendering, you just see a cropped out shade structure. So really having a center zoomed out image is a big help. Also just be aware of what perspective you're going to get when you send us an image. For example, they wanted to see what the rendered shade structure would look like for this sports area. And when you see the structure rendered on the right, you really can't get a grasp of what it looks like from a distance. So on one hand, it might be helpful for the customer to see how the columns are going to fall, which totally would validate, that request. But just be aware of what perspective is going to result in the rendering. Again, here you've got a picture where they're really looking downward towards the area they're trying to get rendered, and on the right, you just can't see the structure. Same thing here. So it really comes together when you guys give us a good image that's zoomed out with an easy perspective to work with. When we're given dimensions and locations so that we can pull any dimensions we might need from the site using Google Earth. Any visual aids you can assist to help us out understanding, what we're looking at. A lot of times, let's say if you're looking for a rendering over a playground area, it might just be very open space, no clean lines for us to work from. So having things like cones kind of spacing out the area and denoting dimensions is a huge help for us. And then last but not least, it always helps to take a lot of pictures from multiple angles so that we can find something. Typically, if you take enough pictures, something's going to work really well. Here's just some examples of nice rendering that good kind of how people follow the rules and let you get zoomed out seating for baseball field. And then here's 2 renderings that we did for the space. Here's Skyspan rendering for some cantilevers. Same space, different area. Shade structure for bleachers. Playground space. And in this image, you can also really see those cones spaced out. So our guy provided us with dimensions between the cones. We used those visual cues. We were able to create a really proportionate shade structure in our rendering. Same thing here. This guy's actually a St. Jeff, so you know him, down in Texas. And he's actually worked with us quite a bit. And, he was kind of given to me as one of the examples of one of our dealers who's really submitting some of the better photos for us to work from. Having these cones in place really allows us to create dimensionally accurate renderings. Shade structure renderings. Pretty much these slides are just highlighting some of the renderings I thought were really good visual cues. And just in working with some of these end users, you can really sense the power of a rendering in helping to illustrate what the product looks on site. Here's 2 double cantilevers using 2 twin 16-foot cantilever on a single column. This is a new product we've got with Skyspan. We've done a few times. It's a hyperbolic cantilever. Got 2 high points, 2 low points. Again, just Cody and those guys with the graphics department do pretty realistic stuff. It really helps to explain to the customer what they're getting. Here's a quick example of how you can go in with a new customer and quote a few projects. This is a project we did up in, you guys actually did out in Weston. So here you've got that rock lava wall we saw earlier. Here you've got all your columns outside the rock wall. And the reason this was able to be sold is they've got this outdoor patio, prevailing westerly winds that constantly blew on this patio. They didn't want a permanent shade structure. They didn't want to go through the permitting process. They wanted an umbrella that could meet the wind loads. So they went with our 16-foot square cantilevers. They placed the columns outside the rock wall so they wouldn't be an obstruction. And that's how they were able to do the project. So these next few slides just kind of show the columns being placed outside the wall and the installation. And then here's kind of the end result.
Spring, can we get all these images?
Yeah, definitely. So let me show you a quick project that we sold with Skyspan. We also quoted from Skyspan and quoted from Shade. And this is how I'll often quote when I'm talking with a customer. I'll usually give them a couple options because we have, like we talked about earlier, multiple tiers of pricing. So often for the same space and same coverage, we can provide different pricing tiers. And that's what this job will show you really good. Here we quoted 6 18-foot hexagon sunset umbrellas for the kids' pool. It had a budget cost of $27,000 installed. As an alternative to the Skyspan product, we quoted a quad sail, 45-foot by 45-foot. With Skyspan, your umbrellas are going to usually cost more than the installation. The installation is going to represent a third to a half the cost of the product. With Superior Shade, installation is typically going to run almost as much as the product costs. So, for example, this Superior Shade quote pricing at $33,000 installed, the quad sail probably priced in somewhere around $16,000, as did the installation. So where Skyspan will typically price out higher per square foot for the product, the installation is going to be kind of the equalizing factor between Skyspan and Shade. So here we've got 2 options, one $33,943 and the other $27,000. What they ultimately ended up using was 4 of the Sunset umbrellas instead of 6. But by giving them these 2 tiers of pricing and 2 options, we were able to win that fight. Also at the same installation, we did this upper dining patio. So here we've got 3 18-foot hexagon Sunset umbrellas rendered at $13,665 budget price installed versus 3 18-foot hexagon vistas. The biggest difference obviously being from the rendering, you can see you've got wide open space underneath with the cantilevers. So although the vistas were $5,000 more, the ability to have that patio area wide open was appealing to them. So you've got about a $1,000 cost difference per unit, which is $3,000 of the cost. The other cost was basically made up by the fact that these 3 vistas had to have a concrete footer poured in those garden areas, whereas the Sunset umbrella could mount directly to the concrete slab and be epoxy anchored. That's kind of where the costs caught up to one another. They ultimately chose that Vista option. Here we did a grass dining area. They didn't actually end up choosing this. We only really gave them the one option for the Sunset umbrellas, but they kind of chose to focus on some other areas instead.
You're saying that Sunset umbrellas don't require a footer then? You can do epoxy break through.
If you've got a 4-inch slab, you can epoxy break through that, yeah. We did a cabana quote. We're using our conic style, and then we used the flat top style. So the price was pretty comparable, about $4,000 difference between the conic and the flat top, and they ultimately chose the flat top. Again, all I'm trying to say here is basically you can cover the same area because we offer a lot of the same shapes and sizes by just giving multiple tiers of pricing. And they're not automatically going to go with the cheaper option. A lot of times functionality of the cantilever might outweigh the cost of the Horizon Sunset. But what it does allow you to do is kind of meet that budget, meet them in the middle with what they're trying to do and what price point they need to be at. So the last area we rendered for these guys was the 18th hole poolside, and we did 3 18-foot hex vistas. Ultimately, they ended up going with 2 of them instead of 3. But here you've got a project with installation that was an $80,000 job, and we won it because we were able to present them with multiple options for the areas and meet them in the middle with what they were trying to do to cover the space. So that's kind of the finale of the presentation there. I'm available to you guys anytime if you ever need help, or if you're even on site and you're just looking for some advice on, what umbrellas to use or what space, or what products might fit the space best, anything like that. And that graphics department we've got can really do some quality renderings, which I would really strongly recommend you guys, explore when you're doing these projects and trying to quote Skyspan option, because we really are fighting an uphill battle where people think they know what an umbrella is and what its limits of what it can do are. But, we're selling these structures that really can last years and years and really can provide them something maybe they haven't thought of yet. And a lot of times that rendering is going to be the difference between them visualizing and understanding that or then, doing what they've always done.
What's the lead time for your renderings? How liberally should we be requesting those?
Typically, it's going to be 3 to 5 days. Any chance you have to get quality images, then you've got a qualified customer I'd request a rendering. But typically, I will always curtail that by saying, qualify the customer. See if we're within the budget. See if they're interested in the product. Once you've qualified them, go for it. I'd love to see more rendering requests.
We'll talk to you about some offline too. Can you talk to these guys about connecting the umbrellas together so that you have a complete waterproof canopy?
Yeah. So if you look at any of our umbrella canopies, one of the things you'll notice is they all have that contoured edge to them. I'll kind of scroll back and look at a couple of these. For example, if you look at the edge of this cantilever on the top right, notice that the canopy edge has an arc to it. And the reason for that is there's a stainless steel cable that runs the perimeter of the canopy. So when you put 2 square umbrellas side by side, what you'll have is sort of an oval football-shaped gap between the units. Now, when people are trying to fully waterproof an area, that's kind of a problem. So we do what's called a link panel. A link panel is basically a football-shaped piece of fabric that is custom built to fit the space between 2 umbrellas. So what we would do is we would install a zipper on the underside of the canopy. And what we would do is once the units have been installed, we would take measurements between arm tip and arm tip of each umbrella next to one another, and we would custom fabricate a link panel piece that would fit directly between them The reason we don't do it ahead of time is because if you install it maybe 6 inches to the right, the fabric has no stretch to it. So we build it to order, just kind of like you would a stay on a superior shade once it's been installed. And that zipper is in place between the umbrellas and multiply waterproof gear.
And that works on both Vista and also the Panorama, or?
In the Sunset Horizon and Vista, the 3 standard umbrellas is where you most commonly see it. You'd also most commonly see it between square units. We could always do it between hexagons, but really with the shape of it, it wouldn't lend itself as well. The Panorama, having a perimeter frame, is going to have squared off edges. So typically, if you were going to try and connect multiple units, kind of like we saw earlier with that 20 by 40, we would simply make the canopy one single canopy because it's going to be a permanent structure. So it's going to be basically canopy engineered and designed to fit the space. Let me zoom back and I'll get to it. Go the wrong way. It's under Panorama. So in that bottom left one, you've got 2 20-foot square units side by side. So whereas with normal umbrellas, we'd actually have to create an independent link panel to connect 2 separate units. In this case, we actually create one solid membrane that's 20 by 40 feet.
Okay. And in South Florida, Paul was talking about the wind load requirements for the umbrellas. That Panorama is much better solution than Vista.
So Paul, if you're looking to do a permanent structure that has to meet the 135 or 150 or whatever mile per hour wind code, the Panorama is where we could do it. We'd have to do a perimeter frame. We'd have to size it accordingly. But that's where we can engineer the structure to meet it. Otherwise, what we're doing is we're selling umbrellas, portable, retractable, removable umbrellas. They're not considered structures. They're not considered permanent. They shouldn't require permitting. Most of the time when someone does request field drawings, kind of in a higher installation site where they just do it for due clause, like the Thriller Stadium I showed earlier at Disney. It's kind of just their process.
But the Vista can typically supersede that?
The Vista would probably max out at 85 mile per hour stand when open, and then closed we could engineer probably as high as we could. But again, it's just going to be umbrella to have that feeling. The high par could probably meet whatever we need to meet as well.
The high par Vista?
We could as well with that. The high par umbrella from the Terra project.
Okay.
One of the things I'd point out too is once we have to start engineering these for higher wind loads, like 135 or 150 mile per hour, we have to use thicker fabric. And Ferrari fabric, color options really expire once we get beyond a certain point. So if you notice a lot of these custom projects, they'll have white canopies. The reason is the fabrics that are 2 or 3 times thicker than what we're using in the color fabrics are really only available in white. That's why when you look at like the Georgia Dome or the Denver Airport or any of these large amphitheaters or football stadiums, they typically are white. Once you order like a 10,000 yard roll order, then you can really customize the color to be anything you want. But if we do have to engineer it for higher wind loads, like 130, 150 mile per hour, our color options might drop down just to white.
These are sexy. Custom design, is that something that's consideration going forward? I know with exposure to these new interesting projects, we'll probably have more interesting folks trying to do something a little more unique. Is that the direction that Superior's going yet, or is that?
I would say right now, in terms of custom structures, our biggest capability is in terms of taking the wave crest, modifying it, making it a little different. I would say it's also taking the Panorama perimeter frame style design and meeting a size that you need. But I would say at this point, we kind of have a ceiling, probably anything larger than 30 by 30 is kind of our max size for custom structures. Because truthfully, the umbrellas are bread and butter with sales for Skyspan. I mean, it's just something we sell every day. It's very repeatable. Whereas the custom stuff's a little more fun.
Can you speak to branding of these different umbrellas?
With the logo.
Yeah, how much does it fit the logo?
Okay. When we print on the canopies, one of the things that people will ask is, can you print on the top, can you print on the bottom at the same time? The fabric's pretty translucent to light, so I usually recommend against that, because what happens is whatever you print on the top can typically be viewed through the canopy from underneath. So that's one thing I'd quickly point out, is you really can only do one or the other, and typically we recommend only printing on the top. When we print umbrellas, we basically have to pay a one-time setup fee through our printer, where they're basically dissecting the umbrella canopy panels, the left side and the right side, and they're laying out the artwork for us. That typically has a $100 cost to us, and then what we have to pay for is the actual printing on the canopy itself. Because inks are translucent to color, what we have to do is we have to do a white coating on top of the fabric first, and then we do multiple coats of ink on top of that to create your logo. So it really depends on sometimes the fabric. So maybe a brighter color like red might carry a higher print cost than something that's matte finish, might be a little lesser. So it can vary a little bit, but a rough and tough number to say would be about $300 retail per side per unit. That cost drops as you increase the number of logos or the number of units, because a lot of that's built into the setup cost, and then as we're printing multiple things, it just decreases the cost.
Sizing these. We're actually trying to figure out what, how big of an umbrella we should be recommending for even hospitality settings. Is there any rule of thumb that you would use?
Most of the time, I'm going to recommend the larger units that the space will fit. Like I mentioned earlier, the cost difference from a 10 to a 12 to a 13-foot unit doesn't change that much. If you look at your price sheet, it's usually only $50 to $100 to size up. The pricing really is going to change when you change between the Horizon, the Sunset, to Vista model. So most of the time, customers are going to go with the largest, unless their space has some sort of limitation that requires them to use a smaller unit.
Systems. Do we do the misting systems after? Is that an aftermarket product, or is that usually?
Typically, yes, it's going to be an aftermarket deal.
But that's something that you're able to provide?
You can probably do it through your guys, or we could sort of find it when it's happening.
Okay. Because I know you can usually pre-wire these, but I didn't know how elaborate what you want to do, if it's something that you need to include in your quote request.
With the Sunset and Horizon, the columns have extruded channels inside them for misting lines. So in that case, we could actually do some sort of pre-wiring incorporation with you guys. For the Vista, because it actually ships in 3 separate distinct pieces, you can't really pre-wire anything. It's done on site. There's not as much we could do there, but we could do some fabrication work to really lend itself towards the installation misting.
Okay. Any consideration for extending the warranty on fabric?
We only get a 7-6, we get 5 for manufacturing retractable structures. So we don't really have that ability, but typically the canopy only represents maybe a fifth of the cost of the structure. So a lot of times the frame will outlast the structure, and then once they've had the structure for 5 years, they'll purchase a new canopy, whether it's the same color or maybe rebranding with a different color.
So we can replace canopies too then? Yeah. Separate. Okay. Wow, that's great. And you mentioned too that you can actually collapse the horizon.
Yes, you can. Yeah, it takes about 15 minutes. The way it's done is that, let me go back to the Horizon. I'll try and explain this the best I can while you're looking at it. I'll just give a picture of the sunset, and it might be the easier way to explain the difference. So if you look at the top right photo, basically at the top of the column is the midcast where all the roots of the umbrella attach. The outer column, which leads from the base plate up to that midcast, is a 3.5-inch diameter column. Inside that column is a telescoping column that has about a 2.5-inch diameter. And that column is just simply floating there when it's done with Horizon umbrella. When it's done with a Sunset umbrella, there's an internal worm gear that basically lifts and lowers that floating column. In the Horizon, because there's no worm gear, it's basically just simply floating there. So when you're installing a Horizon umbrella, ship it jacking construction brace, it basically lines up parallel with the column, travels all the way up to the very top of the umbrella, and then as that jacking column is erected and raised, installation, the umbrella will open. There's a pre-drilled hole in the telescoping column, and once it reveals itself above the midcast, you basically just put a through bolt, lock it in place, remove the tension on your construction brace, take it off site, it's installed.
Okay.
So it's about a 15-minute process whether you're going to open it up or take it down.
But the customer could do that then, or
Yeah.
Not the
Customer can do it.
and setting it back up is something that they can do too.
We've got a video on YouTube. If you just Google Skyspan Horizon installation, it'll show the use of that construction brace, and you can see it opening and closing. It's not terribly difficult.
See a lot of customers do their own installs too then.
Yeah. Especially with the Sunset Horizon, they ship 100% assembled. All you have to do is basically provide the anchoring for them. So if you got an existing concrete slab, it's not too much of a stretch to drill in 4 half-inch pots chambers.
Mm-hmm.
Do any of the other guys have any questions or anything you've seen that you like or don't like or questions?
I'm good.
Friday afternoon, my apologies. I got to say, I'm really, really impressed with this. You know, now seeing these rendering abilities that you have and being able to differentiate the two, I think, you know, we're always so one-sided in how we approach shade and looking at different options. And I didn't realize that Skyspan had versatility that it does, honestly.
Yeah. And that's the biggest thing. I mean, a lot of these, like these Sunset and Horizon umbrellas, they ship fully assembled. Epoxy anchoring was such a quick installation. So you look at a 13-foot Skyspan umbrella, epoxy anchored to an existing concrete slab for like an HOA pool area. And then you look at doing the same thing with a 13-foot superior shade umbrella. A superior shade umbrella might price $70,000 cheaper for the structure itself, but the installation is going to take longer and it's going to cost more than just epoxy anchoring an umbrella. So that's kind of where we can level out and we can really compete with them. But at the end of the day, it is a bit more of a hospitality product. So I know some of you who traditionally go park and rec are going to struggle with this a little more. The biggest opportunity I would recommend you guys pursue is chasing these country clubs, neighborhood HOAs, where they not only have a pool area, but also that they will have an opportunity for a playground. That way, if you don't get the Skyspan, at least you're not wasting your time. At least you're in an area that still appeals to you guys and what you sell every day. I think that's the best way that we've found where you guys can kind of have that crossover area where Skyspan is a viable option, but at the same time, you're not really detracting from what you do every day, which can be a little bit more of the playgrounds, the site amenities, the shade structures, the steel structures.
Brian, is there any way to get a maybe like a cost comparison, you know, for different type products? So, you know, different umbrellas, you know, some things that might have crossover between Superior Shade and Skyspan, just so when we're looking at these projects, we can look at it and go, okay, if I go this way, it's going to cost X amount more, but it's going to be prettier. Is there any way to do that?
Well, there's 2 ways we can do it that will be helpful. The first is our marketing team just created these really helpful PDFs, which basically showcase a Skyspan install, a shade install, a playground install, and a structure install. And they basically have broken down percentages of cost. For example, Skyspan, the product costs 50% of the entire project, and the installation might cost 40% or 30%. The remaining cost is associated with freight and engineering. Superior Shade, the product is about 40% the cost of a project. Installation is going to be about 50%, and then engineering and freight might be 10%. We've got these little handy PDFs that you can look at and show to a customer that kind of helps them understand what they're getting for the price point. The other thing that we can help you with is just send in an RFQ for both. You know, send a Skyspan RFQ and send a Shade RFQ for a project you're working on, and then provide 2 options. Skyspan typically turns around quotes for standard products same or next day, so we'll usually get back a little faster than Shade might to you, and then you can just present both options to your customer, explaining the difference between the 2. Because on one hand, you have provided them with an all-weather solution, waterproof Skyspan umbrella, doesn't require permitting, and probably can be installed a little faster than the Shade option. On the other hand, you've got a Superior Shade, which is a sun protection, which might be prioritized over all-weather protection, and it has its benefits as well. So typically, I'll just come in with both and just kind of help them make a decision based on, you know, the benefits of both products. But I'll make sure that we send over is those PDF kind of breaking down costs to Josh. He can distribute them to you guys so that you can kind of have those handy as a sales tool.
All right, thanks.
Anyone else? Okay. Guess we'll wrap up this call, Brent. Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for the time. Again, if you ever need my help, just kind of looking for recommendations for Skyspan products on any of your sites, or if you just want some advice or just pick my brain, just call me anytime.
Sure will. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Everyone have a good weekend.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, go ahead and pause it. Let's see here. There we go.